Hello, today is Wednesday, October 4th, 2023, and welcome to episode 257 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI founder and executive director Jamil Jabber. Can't believe I didn't remember my own name.
Wait a minute.
And I'm joined
What does
here.
it say? What does it say?
And I'm joined here by Jessica Jones, our deputy executive director, and two of NSI's senior fellows, Morgan Vina and Les Munson. We're going to keep that in, by the way. And today we're talking about fentanyl and the deadly drug crossing the U.S. border in the South, killing hundreds of thousands of Americans. So fentanyl is the leading cause of death today amongst Americans between the ages of 18 and 49. Since February of last year, since February of last year to January of this year, so about a year, 105,000 Americans have died of fentanyl-related poisoning and overdoses. It is an epidemic here in the United States. And just yesterday, we learned that the Justice Department is planning on holding multiple Chinese companies and individuals associated with these Chinese companies responsible for the fentanyl epidemic. Yesterday, following on indictments in June, the federal government indicted 8 Chinese entities, 7 companies, 1 criminal organization, and 12 individuals, 4 officers of companies or organizations, and 8 other individuals associated with these companies for the production of fentanyl precursors and the like, shipping those precursors into Mexico, where the Jalisco cartel, the new generation of the Jalisco cartel, and the Sinaloa cartel are shipping these drugs into the United States, as well as shipping some of these materials into Florida and other parts of the United States. They have been indicted in 2 separate sets of indictments, one in the Southern District of Florida, one in the Middle District of Florida. So what we're talking about today is, how big a problem is this really? Is China and the Chinese government responsible at all? And is the U.S. government doing enough to go after not just the Chinese companies and other organizations, but the drug cartels in Mexico and both the Mexican and Chinese governments and their complicity, if any, in this epidemic here in the United States? Les, what do you think? Oh, and by the way, Les has joined me here in the office. For those of you watching on YouTube, he is in the office side by side.
That's how important this issue is, Jamil. I'm willing to sit next to you in person. In all seriousness, this is a hugely important issue. More than 100,000 Americans dead in less than a year because of fentanyl. It tells us several things that I think are all hugely important. The war on drugs is still very much a real thing. People think it's a legacy of the past. It's not. Cocaine, heroin are the things that actually deliver the fentanyl to Americans and kill them. We should remember that. And that's so we need to be paying more attention, just generally speaking, to the war on drugs. Several other thoughts. One, China not doing anything about these fentanyl analogs and precursor chemicals is outrageous. It is the behavior of a pirate country. They should not be doing that. Any responsible actor in the international community should be doing something about these products. Also, the idea that we're going to invade Mexico, I think, is not realistic. What we need to be doing.
Who said we're invading Mexico?
That's the implication of a lot of things that people are saying in the public sphere. It's not going to happen. What we ought to be doing is strengthening the border, and anyone who's not in favor of that ought to be held politically accountable.
Everyone.
And the State Department and Congress need to be doing more with Mexico to collaborate on efforts against these cartels. It's in Mexico's interest and in our interest to be taking more action. Congress led the way on Colombia in years past with Plan Colombia. It was actually a congressional initiative. Congress can be stepping up and doing responsible things here if the administration's not going to do it. This ought to be a top-level issue in all political debates, including at the presidential level.
It is kind of amusing that we're talking about congressional responsibility when we walked up to the very edge of a government shutdown on Saturday, and Kevin McCarthy just lost his speakership between Matt Gaetz and a handful of Republicans and the Democrats. So I'm not sure congressional responsibility is something we can hope for in the near future. But Morgan, what do you think? I mean, can we be doing more on the border? I mean, your former boss, Nikki Haley, the ambassador to the United Nations, the United States, and now a candidate for president, has been talking a lot about fentanyl. What do you think we should be doing here?
Right. So I mean, all I got to say is about these indictments. It's about damn time. The president talked about fentanyl in his State of the Union address, and he talked about seizures, tougher penalties for drug traffickers, and the treatment programs in the United States. What he did not talk about was the role that China is playing in this. I think at this point, these indictments are a good first step, but they should have been taken a long time ago. When Ambassador Haley and other presidential candidates, including sort of many members of Congress, talk about sending the military down to the U.S. border, I think it's a very legitimate idea, and that's something that should be pursued. I'm not talking about launching an incursion across the Rio Grande into Mexico, but ensuring that the Border Patrol has the support that they need. They are completely overwhelmed at this point, as it is with a lot of the illegal border crossings. They need to be supported. The U.S. military can help and augment that through infrastructure and through other means of support and to secure the border.
Okay. I mean, Jess, what do you think? I mean, so Morgan doesn't want to invade Mexico, but she wants to put a lot of troops on the border with Mexico, and look, the cartels are bringing a lot of stuff across. I mean, is this a border problem? Is this a holding China accountable problem? Are these indictments the right thing? Or look, I mean, are we going to even be able to bring any of these organizations into U.S. court? I mean, yeah, there's some folks here in the U.S., but I mean,
going to the root of the problem, right, which is in China, right? So before, at the beginning of the epidemic, China was the primary source of fentanyl coming directly from China to the United States. They manufactured it there and it was sent directly here. That stopped in 2019 with pressure from the Trump administration. And so now they're not making it in China, right? They're just, the precursors are being sent from China to Mexico, and Mexico's, manufacturing it's crossing the border there. So the PRC has control over of the inputs here, right? They can have a direct impact on the fentanyl and the amount of deaths happening in America. Talks when it comes to counter narcotics actions have been stopped since I think Pelosi went to Taiwan, and they haven't restarted, right? And there's a number of conditions, from stories at least, of what China is saying it's not willing to do talks until some sanctions are released on certain institutes and certain organizations. And the Biden administration hasn't played that game, so they're just kind of caught.
Should they play that game?
Or is there other, to Alessa's point, they're being a bad actor across the international stage? So what can allies and partners do to also pressure China to start cracking down?
Jamil, El Chapo, the old leader of the Sinaloa cartel, is in a supermax in Colorado.
He's escaped like 8 times.
Yeah, but right now he's currently in prison. Xi Jinping is actually the biggest drug lord in the world right now.
You want to put Xi Jinping in supermax in Colorado?
I'm just saying we put drug lords in supermax prisons.
All
and Xi Jinping is.
So, I mean, you guys, you heard it here first. Les doesn't want to invade Mexico, but he just wants to put the president of China in a U.S. supermax prison. I mean, we have put other national leaders in U.S. prison for drug trafficking in the past, right?
Manuel Noriega, former president of Panama, in U.S. prison right now.
We invaded Panama, though, to get him.
For drug trafficking.
But we invaded Panama to get him. So you're surely not suggesting we invade China to invade Xi Jinping.
I'm not saying that at all.
Good. All right. Well, folks,
I'm saying drug lords belong in prison.
Folks, that's a wrap. Thanks so much to Tatum Clifton, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for help producing today's episode. Join us again on Friday, October 6th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're also on YouTube, and you can see Les and me in person in the office today. So check out our channel on YouTube. And if you like what you heard, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.